Puggers, it's Preacher. We're going to kick off 2017 by looking at something really interesting. Often we go to various websites and we check certain forums, and depending on where you are in the game, you see the absolute craziest things ever. Things you never experience, or you relate to those things. And you're like, yeah, this is definitely how the game is. Recently, we looked at guilds and how we saw, if you were immediately brought into cesspool guilds, how you perceive guilds as being basically a second trade chat. While there's other people, like myself, who are in raid guilds with some organisation and structure, just don't understand that that's how a lot of people do see guilds, and they don't understand the benefits of being in an organised, well-run guild. Recently then, we've been doing the tanking series and the healing series, and in order to be authentic with this, we have pugged and done everything without using any of the benefits that we could get by having friends in a guild. So we've used no auction house, we've not asked our friends to join in for the most part. Generally speaking, even when streaming, we've tried to avoid, at least in the early part, using streamers and using parts of the audience, because people could perceive, and do perceive, that people in my audience are all sort of farming Mythic Hellier, which is obviously not the case. But still, to try and keep it authentic, we have pugged as much as possible using the pre-made group finder. What we're going to look at today then is how this really highlights the various levels people are in the game, and also the best ways of gearing up, which I think might be interesting to a lot of new players as well, and also seeing how the difficulty, or that's probably the wrong word, challenge would be a better word, the challenge is faced by people who are afraid of moving past certain boundaries because of their perceived idea that if it starts this hard, it's only going to get harder. So I really enjoy this. Also, at the end of the video, I'm going to share a couple of the really terrifying stories that happened to me in Pugs, including, for the first time in about 4 years, I think, I was legitimately kicked from a group. It should be fun. So the whole purpose of this video is just to illuminate these barriers to entry that exist for plenty of people. I'm utterly convinced at this point it's actually nowhere near the majority of people, which I kind of was under the impression that the majority of people was struggling with getting into higher level content. I don't agree with that anymore. I think it's actually an extremely vocal, very frustrated minority of people, and hopefully now we can look at this after having experienced it, and hopefully give those guys some inclination as to what's actually happening once you are able and have the confidence to actually try out all these different areas of the game. And I'm talking about the various different difficulties, because we all live in our own individual bubbles, right? Mine's the raid bubble. People ask me to go to Mythic 12 and 13 and stuff when I log in. And then there's other guys who are in lower guilds doing different things there. They're progressing on heroic. They might be doing that. And then there's the other guys who are kind of casual maybe in a raiding guild, but they don't raid and they're doing this, and etc, etc, etc. And therefore we have our own different perspectives on the game itself. So, after living this life for as long as I have, what I found is that there's some really weird difficulty spikes that go on in the game. Now, difficulty is the wrong word, as I said in the intro. Challenge is more appropriate, because honestly, let's put it this way, and nothing that we're going to talk about today is meant to be offensive, but we have to put it in the right context. And you can even the simplest challenge can become cumbersome if you do it with the wrong people, right? So something that is extremely simple with certain people becomes extraordinarily hard with different people. We're all aware of this happening, right? So this is one of the reasons I am not against giving access to really decent gear for lower level content, because honestly, it doesn't matter. It comes down to the player at the end of the day, how they wield it. I always use the example is I can give my son a machine gun. He's still really not going to be able to do anything with it, right? I can give him a massive two-handed claymore. He's not really going to be able to do any damage with that fucking thing. He's not going to be able to get it working. Now, what I found is that we can make a little graph here, and we'll show it periodically throughout this discussion, is when we see forum posts posted either in the official WoW forums or MMOChamp or whatever, oftentimes it's extremely hard to relate to the problems these guys have, yet we tend to see that a lot of people get on the train on that. Now, they get on the train about absolutely everything and anything that might be a mild inconvenience. That's kind of the age we live in, of mild inconvenience is in fact the biggest deal in the world. But what we see is people asking crazy things like, the pre-made group finder is utter shit. right? And we kind of eliminated that in the past to say, no, occasionally it's utterly shit, but generally speaking, it's actually fine. Most people just kind of want to get their thing done. But it's exaggerated and blown out of proportion for the sake of forum credit, sure. And not only that, it's like a complete unwillingness to try anything that's slightly more difficult because of X Factor and X Factor. And these are the guys we kind of dubbed the excuse makers, and you might be one yourself. We've certainly seen, even though we have proven throughout the tank series and stuff, that you can easily get through this content. It's people like, no, that you just got lucky. But they still make excuses, right? We can't really defeat all of them, but we have certainly helped a lot of people. A hell of a lot. And I can talk firsthand for the sheer quantity of messages and just the amazing amount of tanks that I've run into in my random groups on my main who are like, is that you? And I'm like, yeah. And they're going, I'm learning to tank for the first time and I'm doing really well. It's fucking awesome. I did a Mythic 9 or a Mythic 10 the other day. And I'm like, cool, dude. They're like, I've never even tried it before, but it's all right now. So fucking bones up to you guys. So let's get a scale going for our little graph here. What's the easiest content we can do in the game right now? And that would be the random heroic, right? Now, that's easy for a number of reasons. We can't just say it's easy because it doesn't do a lot of damage, right? That's just a very simplistic way of looking at it. The reason our random heroics are super easy, despite the fact we're paired up with God knows who from God knows where, anybody who has the sheer capability of pressing join queue, is also because it's not going to do a lot of damage. You can afford to be completely carried by one person of any role, which we've talked about in the past. The tank can carry you, a DPS can carry you, and a healer can carry you through those dungeons. But not only that, you tend to get paired up with extremely high-level geared players. Now, we did a test in Mists of Pandaria. Some of you might remember this, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. I'm not even sure if it's the same now. But we took a group of 10 raiders who were all very, very high geared at the time. And we all joined up at exactly the same time for Random Heroic. And we did this a few times, and absolutely none of us got paired up together. What the system did was spread us out into each dungeon. So we 10 of us queued, we all got 10 different dungeons each time. And we were working under the kind of assumption that the algorithm for making groups does its absolute best to put one really high-level geared player into each dungeon to increase the odds of success. Now, that would make sense if that exists. Do I have any definitive proof, or have Blizzard ever said they do that? No, they don't. But it's just generally my experience. So you get geared with somebody who's likely to be able to carry the group regardless, right? That tends to happen. So most of you who do a random heroic will likely have one guy who's doing at least 500k DPS at some point, right? Something that's ridiculous for a random heroic. That's a carry, by the way. 500k is easily a carry. Now, that's the easiest. Then what happens is we hit the wall of Mythic 0. Why do I call it the wall? Let me explain. So at Mythic 0, we have the issue of, one, we're dealing with anybody and everybody still because everybody gets the quests to go into Mythic 0, right? Blizzard is trying to encourage you to get in there. So we always get these posts like Mythic 0 should be queuable. Well, no, I disagree with that. We've discussed this in the past. Finding a group is the first challenge along this journey, along this path that we're about to take to investigate different levels of content, and people have been asking for communities to come back for a while. Mythic 0 is kind of the start of that. You can bump into people, you have to talk to people, etc, etc, etc. Mythic 0, for our scale here, was easily the most difficult challenge posed in WoW right now. PUG Mythic 0. Now, before we get too far into this, let me make something abundantly fucking clear for everybody who I know exists out there. We're talking in really broad generalities across many, many, many runs, and this was the trends I saw doing that. There are always outliers. Always. 100% of the time. That doesn't negate from the trend. The trend was this. Did I get Mythic Zeros that I stomped? Yes. Yes, I did. But the greatest challenge I faced was the base Mythic dungeons. Now, why is that? One, you're not going to find any very high geared players in there, right? So you instantly eliminate that entire chunk of the player base. Raiders are top level PvPers, are people who have reached a certain hype level through Mythic Plus. All those guys aren't in Mythic 0. It doesn't reward enough AP. There's no chance of gear. There's no multiple chests. There's nothing of benefit whatsoever for any of those players to be in Mythic 0. They're just not there. They don't go there, right? So what's left after that is the guys who still have probably no gear, relatively speaking. We're talking World Quest stuff, and have access to probably no friends for the most part. Like, and I'm not saying you're like, oh, look at you, no friends. I'm just saying they haven't met anybody in WoW yet that they can team up with. I found not more, but an extraordinarily large amount of guildless players. Now, does that mean they're new? Does that mean they're horrible people? I don't know. I will say the most vitriol and bitter and awful people I met were in Mythic Zero. The guys who you think are a meme, who rage and freak out at the most random of shit and in the most rudest way. So if you're going to look for people to throw racist and homophobic slurs, the first people to go start dropping words like faggot on a fucking drop of a hat, I found them in Mythic Zero. Just absolute raging lunatics, calling people fucking bitch, you're an asshole, all this stuff, while simultaneously being god-awful at the game. So not exactly people you'd want to play with in any sense. I found them in Mythic Zero. Not only that, these are guys who generally aren't good at the game for whatever number of reasons. So certainly they might just be there, they might only play WoW because they really enjoy the auction house, they really enjoy battle pets, they really enjoy the lore. Could be any number of reasons. What they're certainly not interested in is any form of high-level PvE, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It doesn't bother me. But that certainly means that when it comes to a PvE environment, they make more mistakes than you could possibly imagine, right? Things that we take for granted, or I take for granted, and certainly guys who follow my channel take for granted, are miles away from where these guys' ability level is. So all that combines together to form this challenge, right? I wouldn't say Mythic Zero is difficult content. I would never, ever, ever say that, because I think it's objectively very simple content in the terms of the grand scale of World of Warcraft. Extremely simple content. But at the same time, like we said at the beginning, doing even simple content with the wrong people becomes an overwhelming challenge sometimes, and sometimes you can't even do it. I think I only had one failed Mythic Zero, to give some context to that, but it was certainly just a chore every single time, particularly on my healer. On my healer, it was a god-awful experience, and knowing and having done high-level Mythic Plus without a healer, because everything besides... it's why, to me, these, even the Scorpions are avoidable, but the Jagged Disc throwers in very high Mythic Plus stand out is because that's not avoidable. You can kind of outrange it, I know. And all the raiders are going to be like, well, you fucking can, Preacher. And I'm like, yeah, you can. But you will probably all remember those first weeks of running into like Nelth 11 or Nelth 10 and going, oh my god, my face. And that's because that doesn't happen in any other Mythic Plus, really. Everything else is pretty much avoidable, and or if it's not avoidable, by the time you really notice it's because it's one-shotting you. Like Nightmare Bolt and like 11 Xavius and 12 Plus and all that kind of stuff. That's when you really notice it. But before that point, anybody who's good at PvE was like, everything here is fucking dodgeable, and that's why people run those dungeons without a healer. However, I can tell you Mythic Zero, just back to back, like, this is fucking horrible. This is just, like, I don't even know where this damage is coming from. Like, I didn't know it existed until this point. Pretty regular thing, because I stream as much as possible when I'm doing my PUGs, so we can enjoy it together, is me saying, I didn't know this did this. I had no idea this stuff happened because I avoid most of it. I don't know what it does. There are plenty of things like that that good PvE players don't know happens because they've never been hit by it. Like, it's so obvious for them to like, oh, well, I shouldn't stand in that, right? Or I shouldn't do this. Or your healer is decent enough to dispel things off you before they ever become a problem that you're like, I didn't know this fucking happened. In Mythic Zero, it was a fucking nightmare. Now, why is this important? This is important because now all these crazy things that we read about people hating on a system that we think is very easy start to make so much fucking sense. If your perspective is that, oh god, Blizzard's forcing me into this Mythic thing, which has the connotation, and it has this perceivement, and it has all these predetermined presumptions that this is very, very... This is tied to difficult content because it has the affix Mythic, which is the most difficult raid content in the game that barely anybody is capable of doing, despite the mockery of it and WoW's too easy. Barely anybody is able to actually compete at that level and do well at that level who play World of Warcraft. Then they go into it and they're like, fine, you give me these fucking quests, I'll go through your finder because I haven't got anybody who I can ask to play with, I'll do this and that, and then they get in there and it's awful. Is it hard to see why those guys think that content is, one, incredibly difficult because for the most part, people don't know why they're failing it. This is a big part of World of Warcraft and why I believe and have always taught you guys to not think about if my gem will suddenly make the boss fall over, but to be aware of all the other shit that's actually going on to understand why wipes happen. Because the average player doesn't know what happened that killed them. They just know we didn't kill it and I died. That's all they really know. And put them in that scenario where there's toxic players as well, like we already discussed, and you combine all those things together. Is it any wonder that anybody, one, wouldn't go past that? Why the fuck would I try Mythic 2? Why the fuck would I do that? Because I tried Mythic 0. It was crazy. It was fucking nuts. I'm not going higher than that. That is crazy. And why they would prefer the system to be changed, or they believe it's really, really difficult content. Is that hard to believe? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It actually makes perfect sense. And you look at it from that perspective and you're like, oh, this is why those guys believe that. This is why those guys are so fucking angry, because they perhaps thought, okay, I'm going to try this. They did it and they ran into this scenario at the very first step. The first step before they got a keystone was Mythic 0, and this is what they found. It makes perfect sense to me. And it's just a weird, weird situation where I believe there are a lot of people, not the majority, but there are a lot of people who did that and are now just totally void of trying anything else in the game. I'm going to stick to what they do and just look at it with this bitterness and sort of, this taste in their mouth. So what happens then? And this was really weird. You go to Mythic 2, it's like going back to Random Heroics. It's fucking crazy. It is bafflingly crazy what happens going from Mythic 0 or Mythic 1, whatever you want to call it, to Mythic 2 to 7. It is ridiculous. There is no justification in my mind ever for me to say to somebody, unless you absolutely had to, such as a quest doesn't work in Mythic Plus or whatever, to go to Mythic 0. There is no fucking way I would recommend it. One, you outgear that content by doing world quests or LFR, wherever it is, where you don't have to put up with this shit. And if you do that, you can join somebody else's Mythic run of 2, 3, and 4 and get a key that way, right? It's so bad. I would never recommend anyone go there, because as soon as you hit Mythic 2, why is this happening? I should also point out that Mythic 0, obviously, there's no raiders there. Like we said in the Random Heroics, there's no raiders there. There's not enough AP, there's no gear rewards, so you instantly lose that part of the player base. They just disappear. They can't multi-chest it. Mythic 2 to 7 is incredible. It's so chill and overwhelmingly successful and so much less of a hassle. Again, we're talking in generalized trends here. Were there more difficult Mythic 2s that I did? Yeah, sure. But 2 to 7 was like a godsend. An absolute godsend. Now, why is that? What I found, that Mythic 2 to 7 is populated by the real casual player base, is what I'll call them. And that's the guys who aren't shit at the game, but they just don't have a lot of time to play. They can't afford the time to raid or justify the schedule or whatever it might be. So what do? They overgear the shit out of this content, right? And this has also changed my mindset on Warforged, Titanforged. And the reason for that is simple. These guys might come home from a day at work. Remember, the player base is generally much older now. And they might have put the kids to bed. They might have an hour or so to play some World of Warcraft, right? So what are you going to do in that scenario? You can't raid. You might join LFR. You might do something like that. Or you might do some Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus in the 2 to 7 category offers so many benefits. Firstly, it has the chest system. Now, if you're not used to, like in a raid guild, not 3-chesting something that isn't extremely high is actually a disappointment, right? We're used to it. But if you're not used to it that much, 3-chesting a run is an extremely rewarding, satisfying experience. Even for me, when I 3-chested the runs on my Resto Shaman, I was like, that was cool, man. We 3-chested it. I did well. Everybody did well there. And what you find is people who massively overgear stuff, so they might be 870 and stuff. But what they get to do is 3-chest stuff, which is rewarding in and of itself. They don't have much difficulty because they squash the dungeon because they outgear it quite nicely. And not only that, they still have chance of getting upgrades. So they have the incentive of doing AP, getting this nice multi-chest reward at the end, and getting gear upgrades because it can Titan Forge through the arse and come with gem slots and all that kind of stuff. They get all these benefits without barely any stress. There's barely any stress in doing dungeons with one affix. There's barely any stress there. It's pretty easy for most players to get through that who can overcome the Mythic 0 barrier. And then you have... Because this is the weird thing about challenge. Once you get players who are even remotely aware of what's going on, healing is easier. Healing, it's like a +7, as stupid as this is easier than... Or a +6 before the next affix. Healing a +6 is easier than healing a 0. Think about that for a moment. It's easier. DPS across the group is generally higher, so things die quicker than if you're trying to solo it in a Mythic 0 because everyone else isn't doing the damage they should be doing. Tanking is better because your tank isn't doing the crazy shit that I see all the time by healer, like Blood DKs who don't Death Strike, and fucking Prot Paladins who don't think Light of the Protector is a good spell. I've done entire dungeons where the healing on the Prot Paladin has been less than 0.5%, and I'm just like, dude... What? What are you doing? This is crazy to me. But there you go. These guys exist down there, but once they start getting a little bit better at the game, they overcome that wall. They don't see Mythic Plus as something to be scared of. The whole game changes to being a much more fun, much more relaxed, and much more rewarding and satisfying experience. Now, as a brief note, because again, I'm not really out to offend anybody here, but I'm hopefully encouraging people who tried Mythic and maybe did Mythic 0 and had a horrible time to go a little bit further, because the trend certainly happens this way, is once you get to 7+ and you get the second affix, what I then found was a different kettle of fish entirely. Success was still pretty high. People generally trying to queue for the 7+s were usually like appropriately geared for it or over geared it anyway. What I actually tended to find, but not as widespread as what I saw in like 2 to 7 and at Mythic 0, it was generally raiders, but it was the kind of guys who don't have a grouping guilds. Now, again, I'm kind of poking the bear a little bit here, but you'll know who I mean. Let me put it in context for those of you who are in that bubble. If I was to ask you what's your Karazhan group and when does it go, you're either in the mindset of like, I can name you the 4 people I do it with and the exact time we do it. Or you're like, I don't have a group and I've been in the guild for like 4 years. Now, again, I'm not trying to put presumptions or just assume anything here, but I'm generally saying there are always people in guilds, and they're usually 1 or 2, who you just don't want to group with, right? They're fine players, but their attitude fucking stinks. It absolutely stinks. So if you're sat on Discord or whatever, and there's a Mythic Plus group forming, and they go, I'll DPS, and then immediately someone else says, I'll DPS, so you have 2 people. There's always that one guy you're definitely going to pick, or the one guy you're hoping, or you probably wouldn't even advertise the group to if he was in the Discord channel, right? That happens everywhere. That's just human nature. I tended to find that the Mythic 7s and Plus generally had at least 1 to 2 of those guys in there. And if there's any minor mistake, were the first to be super elitist about it, super jerk faces about it. They almost seem to like, if there was a ninja pull, they were like typing before like the arrow would even hit them. Let's say if it was a barrage that went astray, before the arrow even hit, so I'm like, oh my fucking god, how the fuck can you be so fucking bad at this game? Oh my god. That kind of attitude, which was just... But again, as I said in the tanking series, is once you start getting to the double affixes and hitting up towards 10+, I would certainly recommend that you start playing with friends and your guildies at that point, because it's not worth it in my mind. 2 to 7 is the dream. 7+ is fine. Again, we're talking general trends here. I had no difficulty doing the 7s either. It was just generally a case of slightly more toxicity, I guess, was in there. And again, that's the point. You should hopefully be trying to find a guild and getting with friends and stuff, because, you know, there's decent levels of gear and stuff in there. And that's pretty cool. So those are my findings, those blocks and those barriers to overcome. And definitely the challenge of WoW and where it really lies is this is what I found. Love to see your opinions on it from your personal experiences. But again, try not to do outliers. Yeah. I'm sure there'll be guys out there who've done well. I've done loads of Mythic Zeros and they've all been great. Cool. Be aware, though, if you're a tank. On my tank, I can get any mythic. I don't notice any bad groups because you can carry the entire group through a mythic 0 if you're a decent tank. But generally, my healer and my monk on my DPS is what I found there. Okay, so those, again, the general trends. Nothing to say that you don't have these experiences that were totally different. I had them too. These were trends I found over many runs. Some fun things then. I've mentioned this one on a stream a couple of times, but I'll say it here for the record. I found some really sly things going on at Mythic 0. Really sly, particularly on my tank. The slyest of which was groups knowing that Maw of Souls is really quick. So what they do, is they advertise like a Mythic 2 or 3 Maw of Souls need tank, right? And they have like no gear requirement pretty much, and they invite you and they summon your ass down there, and then when you go into the dungeon they instantly pull. They like run off and pull, so your tanking instinct kicks in. It's like, oh shit, people have pulled, I need to go and tank now. And then you go, whoa, what the fuck, bro? What? Wait a minute, isn't this Mythic 2 and 3? And they're like, no. And then you're thinking, was it? Did I queue for a Mythic 0? I thought there was a Mythic 2 and 3. And they're like, no, it's Mythic 0. And they fucking do advertise it as a Mythic 2 and 3. It isn't, but they advertise it that way. And what they're hoping for is Maw of Souls is so short that they're kind of just hoping that you'd clear it, because it might take as long to go out and go in the pre-made group finder on your newbie alt tank and then try and find a group, right? That's what they're hoping. It's like, it might take longer for you to do that. You might as well just clear it while you're here. Maybe you'll get an item or some shit. That's what they're hoping for. That happened to me twice. So bear in mind that does fucking occur. The second time it happened, I just left. I was like, you motherfuckers, you've done it to me again. And therefore I made a rule. No more low-level Maw of Souls. No, thank you. Getting kicked from a group. Oh, man, this really made me question my life, my existence, and everything. And let me explain why. What did I get kicked from on my lovely Resto Shaman? I got kicked from the random heroic Halls of Valor. I know. I know you're going, what? What the fuck? And I'm like, hey, believe me, I was in that boat as well. When it happened, I'll put it in context for you for a minute. But when it happened, I was looking at my SCADA for like 10 minutes because I began to question everything I'd ever done in my life. Why was I in there in the first place? Because it wasn't for the AP. I don't have the artifact knowledge for that yet to make that worthwhile, really. But what it was, was I wanted to get a new add-on. I remembered that I used to have my grid set up so that if I had a main buff that I put on people like Earth Shield and shit, that I could have it as like an actual graphical icon and I could customize that. So I wanted that again. So base grid allows you to put icons in the corner of the raid frames, but it's just like a colored icon. So it's like a yellow square if they're a tank and stuff like that. I want it to be a graphical symbol. I just find that easier to work with and looks a bit nicer. So I downloaded the add-on and thought, oh, well, I need to configure it, so I'll just jump in the random heroic, because generally speaking, you just DPS random heroics. Like, having to heal a random heroic is pretty fucking weird. Generally speaking, you can throw out a couple of heals here and there, but generally you don't need to heal, you DPS through them. So I jumps into there, and it's Halls of Valor, no big deal. And I start setting up my add-on, when I suddenly notice that the fucking tank is getting battered by the first two mobs. I'm like, oh shit. But I didn't know it was the tank at the time. I hadn't checked, so I was sorting out my raid frames. So I was like, maybe the DPS pulled. Maybe it was something like that. Maybe they pulled something at the top, and maybe they've not aggroed it. Maybe it's attacking DPSs, whatever. So I heal the guys up, and I'm like, cool, okay, get back to configuring my add-on. The next trash pack, the same. Like, oh shit, spamming my ass off. I was like, this is crazy. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so I've got a bit of a bad group here. I'm actually going to have to do some healing rather than sort my add-ons out. So I decided, right, I'll just leave the add-ons until later on. No big deal. I'll do it at a different time. Let's get through this dungeon then, because this might be quite fun. I was filming it, so I was like, okay, we might have some fun in here. It ended up being that by the time we'd got to the mead hall, I'd run out of mana in random heroic, and my shaman is 846. What? I know. I was just spamming my arse off to keep these guys alive. And you'll notice, I'm kind of speeding through it in the background, but you'll notice that the average amount of people who had aggro was 3 at any time. You can tell by the red outline that's on my frames, is those are the people who currently have aggro. And I'm still keeping up with purges and interrupts and all that kind of stuff. Doing my job, right? I'm stunning, I'm dropping stun totem, etc., etc. And it was a hell of a ride. I thought, this is fucking crazy. This is really cool. I was having fun in a way. Not getting to do much damage, but that's okay. It's not really why I was there. So by the time we hit the mead hall, I was running out of mana. So once I got down to like absolute scraps and I saw that they were still pulling more, I don't know who was doing it. I don't think it was a bad tank, honestly. Maybe a combination of multiple things. I know there was aggro everywhere, but I wasn't sure if like the Moonkin was pulling or somebody else was pulling. I couldn't really tell. I was trying to keep up with the health bars. And I said I did the thing that I think got me kicked, is I said I was out of mana. I said I was And the druid noticed and threw me an innovate, so we were fine. We were absolutely fine. Mana went back up, and I just carried on healing as normal. And then I got kicked. That was the point I got kicked, actually. I was like, what the fuck? I actually thought my WoW had bugged out. I was like, what's going on? And then I saw the message. Like, I mean, I've been kicked before, but I get kicked because I'm me. Like, people think it's funny. Like, so if, they think it's funny by kicking me. It's like, kick him, ha, 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 right? It's preach. That's okay, because then they whisper me and stuff, and they're like, ha, ha, we kicked you. I'm like, yeah, you got me, I guess. Oh, no. Right? But I saw that you've been removed from the group. And I was like, what the fuck? That's when I went into panic mode. I was in complete panic mode, because I'm thinking to myself, oh, shit. The first thought I had was, oh no, have I installed this add-on and it's fucked up my raid frames or my mouse overs or whatever, and I've actually not been healing anybody? And I've actually just been like spam healing myself like this entire time? Was the druid off healing? Was the fucking demon hunter just spam healing himself? Was it something like that? Oh my god, if that's what's happened, Jesus Christ, fair enough. Thank God you kicked me. Right? I mean, that's my fuck up big time. And I would have totally accepted that. And that'd have been a funny story, is that I went through all of Halls of Valor just healing myself at full health, just like spam healing myself. But no. No, it didn't turn out. What it actually turned out, for the healers out there who could put some context to this themselves from experience, is my Halls of Valor run, between the start and the Mead Hall, the total average HPS I had to put out in Halls of Valor was 200k. Like 205,000 HPS I'd had to put out since the start of the dungeon. And it turns out, no, I wasn't healing other people. I'd healed the Demon Hunter for 44 million damage. But 44 million hit points is what I'd healed him for by the time we got there. Let alone the, few million I'd had to throw into other people. I think the Boomkin was like 6 million, and the Hunter, I think, was about 4 million. I haven't got the footage in front of me. It might be the wrong classes. But I remember a Moonkin because I got innovate. But yeah, millions. And I was like, holy shit, I've been fucking healing like dicks in here, like constantly fucking spamming. I mean, if I've averaged that, you can imagine the burst healing I had to put out at like various phases. I wasn't paying much attention, but yeah, absolutely nuts. I was like top of the spells and everything. I was like, and I came away from that experience just thinking, God help whoever goes in next, right? Because you can imagine what the rest is going to be like. That's going to be one crazy, crazy ride. But wow, yeah, getting kicked, man. Fucking happened. Man down, man. You watch this guy for guides? I can't fucking believe it. Anyway, I hope you have had a great New Year's, guys. Those are my little fun tales for you today. See you later. Bye-bye.